everybody. We're going to be starting in about 1 minute if you'll take a seat. Come on in and take a seat. We'll be starting in about 1 minute. Thank you. Come on in, take a seat. We're about to start. All right, everybody, this is our conversation with the mayors from 4 different cities, and I'd like to introduce them now on the stage from the far end, as far from me. Tim Sandoval. Sandoval was elected mayor of Pomona in 2016. He's a founding member of Bright Prospect, a mentoring organization that has helped more than 2,000 at-risk youth become the first generation of their family to complete a bachelor's degree. Next to him, James Butts, mayor of Inglewood, 3rd term, elected last November. Prior to his first election in 2010, Mayor Butts served as a police officer, rising to the rank of Deputy Chief of Police for the city of Inglewood and the Chief of Police for the city of Santa Monica. Next to him, Emily Gabel-Luddy is the mayor of Burbank. She was elected to the Burbank City Council in 2011, but her public service career began in the planning department of the city of Los Angeles, where she gained over 30 years of practical experience. Now, up till 2 days ago, Thomas Small was the mayor of Culver City, and rather than put his successor on the hot seat during this panel, after just 2 days in the job, former Mayor Small has agreed to join us today to talk about his time as the leader of Culver City, but also in attendance today is Culver City's newly installed mayor, Megan Solly-Wells. If you would stand and wave, maybe they'll get you next year. All right. Mr. Small was first elected to the City Council in 2016. He was previously a Commissioner of Cultural Affairs. As an architectural writer and consultant, he's worked on projects in urban and sustainable design and planning and development and historic preservation in the Americas, Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. So that's your panel. And I have some questions here from Luskin that is suggested, but what I'd like to do is I may pitch a question out, may pitch it to one of the mayors, or maybe whoever wants to field it first, but I kind of go a little rogue here. If you want to follow up on a comment from another one of your colleagues up here, I think following through would be, if you've got something you want to add on to that, I think that's the time. So please do. So let me ask the first question, which I'm sure you'll all want to answer. Housing affordability is the #1 issue that impacts people's satisfaction with life in Los Angeles, according to the Quality of Life Index that was released here today. How is the home affordability crisis playing out in your city, and what are you doing as mayor to address the issue? Who'd like to take it first?
Well, I'll talk first because I'm the planning geek, right? First of all, thank you so much for this invitation, and I'm glad to be in the company of these mayors up here because we're all about comparable sized cities. We're reasonably the same size. We may have the same kind of structure, so I think it's going to be a very meaningful conversation. I will preface my comments by saying when I got elected to office, we were in the biggest recession since the Great Depression, and nobody was building. And nobody has been building. In 2012-13, our Burbank Council voted to support a 241-unit project, and we have subsequently since then received some additional applications for development, which we are looking at. Housing affordability has affected us probably in the following way. That real estate prices have risen faster than our ability to look at new housing developments, entitle them, and get them built in the city. that in the process of looking at the construction of housing, some of the developers have said they're going to put things off because they can't find the labor to build the units that they're seeking entitlements for. As properties have overturned, particularly smaller properties, but also properties, I will say, of 25 units or more, the price of rent has gone up significantly. And so we've had calls for rent control in our city, although our city in 2016 did not support the statewide initiative for rent control. I'm sure those kinds of pressures will continue. So we are in the business of doing housing. We have our own nonprofit housing developer, and I'll say something more about that. But those are the significant changes, I think, that we have to keep in mind when we look at how housing affordability has affected the city of Burbank.
All right, mayors, and I think that maybe if we try to hold it to about a minute, because we have a lot of questions, but that was great. That way we can get to some and follow up from the audience and a little more Q&A up here too, but that was a good start. Mayor Butts, I see you've got the mic up.
Well, it's an interesting question for us now because housing affordability was never an issue when I took over as mayor in Inglewood. After the recession in 2008 and the housing market financing collapse shortly thereafter with the stated income, no documentation loans, it took an already depressed market in Inglewood and it depressed it further. And so housing affordability was never, those two words were never said here. We had more affordable units per capita in whole numbers than anywhere in the South Bay. Our average rents are still the lowest of anywhere in the South Bay, but that's not going to be for very long. And so we have opened 43% of all the units that we've opened, affordable units since 1969 have been opened in the last 8 years I've been mayor. So we really on point. Then we started the Rams, the Chargers, the Clippers, the Forum, the Super Bowl's coming, NC2A Championship Bowl game, the Olympics in 2028, and now rents are going up. And what's happening is people are coming in, they're buying buildings that people bought for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 20 years ago, and they're paying $3 and $4 million for them, and they need to have rents that will let them make their mortgage. But these are investments. And so what we've done is we're implementing what we call a housing protection ordinance. We don't use the words rent control. It's meant to be balanced. It's meant to not punish the mom and pops that have had to keep their rents low because housing was not worth what it was in the South Bay, but at the same time to force investors to include in their prospectus, their pro forma, that they're going to have to pay relocation allowances for any increase over 4%. That will give the renter the option to say, I want to take a relocation allowance, which is roughly 5 times the average rent for the size unit that you're in right now. And that can be significant money if you want to come in and double people's rent. So that's where we are.
All right, Mayor Small, I'll give you a chance to answer that.
Well, as a lot of people in this room probably know, we have been, in Culver City, have been on sort of a commercial tear over the last 10 years with a fantastic, really, renaissance in Culver City. And it really seems like it's even accelerating now. And I have to say that the city has not been focused on affordable housing in the past, and we are, like a laser now, but it's hard to gear up for it. I think we have 26 programs in our community development department that we've started, but most of them are studies to figure out where we can do and what we can do, because we are largely built out. But we're going to have more than 3,000 new employees in our downtown just from Amazon alone, and that's not even counting Apple and HBO, who are also coming to our downtown in the next few years. So I am wondering, how much over the next couple of years, and this will, I know that Megan and I are going to be talking about this all the time in the coming months. Do we need something even more radical? So I look at what Mayor Butts has done with the words that I will not mention, and I'm wondering if that might be in store for us as well. So we don't. It's the events are coming on too fast.
All right, Mayor Sandoval, let me give you a chance to answer that too.
Good morning. Before I say just a couple of words about our approach to housing I wanted to share that shortly after I was elected, working with our faith-based community and our community-based organizations, Pomona elected to become part of the Compassionate Cities movement. And so I say that because that helps to inform our approach to housing. And so when I think of housing all the way from people who are homeless to those who are teachers who cannot afford to live in our community because of the high cost of homes. And so the city elected several years ago to build a homeless service center, which we opened up in December, that ultimately will house up to 400. And it has wraparound services. So we've committed to making sure that people have mental health services, addiction services, job placement services. And that's something that the city did not have. It primarily had an armory. Second, for current renters, it's a very complex issue, and I think all of us are avoiding that word, RC. But I want to say that one of the things that we are doing is we're working very closely with our diverse community so that they have input, so that we need to figure out what is the best strategy given that diversity. Does it make sense to implement rent stabilization? Does it make sense for us to create a fund that we as a city, whether it's to write grants or whether it's to actually put money aside, is to make sure that folks can afford the housing in the city? So we're looking at that, but we're also looking at future renters. What does it mean for those who, particularly our young population that wants to come back to their community to be able to live? And so we're working with, in fact, some of our faith-based community that has property that perhaps may be willing to do millennial-type housing, suite-style housing. So we're really trying to think outside the box. But I think the key is making sure that we're having those conversations, they're inclusive, and that we're partnering with our faith-based, also our community-based organizations as well.
All right, mayors, I'll use the word rent control, and it goes into the next question I'm going to ask you. On a map based on research made available to the public by UCLA Luskin, 3 of the 4 cities represented on this panel have experienced at least some degree of population displacement among minority residents in the last 20 years, and recent media reports have raised the issue of potential gentrification in the 4th, Inglewood. Is it inevitable that growth and the addition of transportation hubs will lead to gentrification? How is your city balancing investment and progress without avoiding displacement? Mayor Butts, I'm going to pitch it to you first because you talked about relocation. Is there some way to keep people in your city?
Well, excuse me, but I think the premise that it's founded on is so ridiculous. Nobody ever used the word gentrification in relation to Inglewood when it was an all-white community and blacks moved in the 60s. They never used that word. Gentrification is a socioeconomic term that follows any city that achieves a level of economic growth. What happens is, and here's what's happening, people that ordinarily would never have considered moving to Inglewood now see it safe and see it as a bargain compared to Westchester and areas surrounding in Los Angeles. That's what people do. They look for bargains. So if you have 3 engineers from Northrop and they make $150,000 a year, one's black, one's Hispanic, and one's white, which one gentrifies an area? They all do. And so what we do is we get trapped into the first thing we do, and it's purposeful. The media wants you to do that. They want you to see, they talk about displacement. You're not displacing anybody. If someone sells a property and gets what they ask for, it's discrimination not to sell it to someone based on their race. It's not displacement. It's the natural ebb and flow of the economic market. So the biggest issue when people in our city, when people talk about displacement, they're talking about rents that at one time people could afford, and people of a certain socioeconomic stature cannot afford that anymore. Well, overwhelmingly, they tend to be black and brown. But the reality is this happens everywhere, every day in the United States of America for every city where there's economic growth. And so and that's why we don't use the word rent control, because you really don't have the right to control what someone can get for their asset. But there's a social cost to providing housing. You're not a hardware store. You're not selling batteries and jumper cables. You're in control of people's families' residences. So what we feel is that it has to be included in your pro forma. It becomes a cost of raising rents that you become subject to displacement allowances. And we feel that's the best that we can do. And we are, and this is just proposed, right now we have a moratorium on rent increases more than 5% in a 12-month period. But what I'm talking about has been proposed to the council, and we will vote on the final package within 60 days. But what we're saying is there has to be some orderly transition, and what we want to do is provide options for people whose rent is increased, but at the same time, we don't want to confiscate people's property and tell them how to run their business, when they can fix their roofs, when they can upgrade properties. So it's delicate, but see, that word gentrification is so loaded, and newspapers and the media love it because they want an impression of people being kicked out. People are not being kicked out of a place. It's the natural ebb and flow of economics.
Mayors, who else would like to jump? The question is, as written here, is how is your city balancing investment in progress while avoiding displacement?
I will jump in here. I think that Mayor Butts raises with good authority one of the vexing issues in discussing gentrification. Thank you. The experience in Burbank is this. We have a nonprofit housing development corporation in the city of Burbank. And in the past, this housing corporation was supported by tax increment financing through the redevelopment agencies, and it was able to buy and renovate several properties in the city of Burbank. And in the process of doing that, our focus was on 5 focus neighborhoods. They're the lowest income in the community of Burbank. And the purpose of doing this was to have each of these projects serve as a catalyst for the absentee owners in those neighborhoods. None of the residents were displaced. They were moved out, they were moved back in. The whole point of this was to renovate within the context of those neighborhoods, deliver revitalized housing to those renters, and not inadvertently displace them out into the broader region. This has been a very successful model. It, I believe, has helped maintain those residents, and more importantly, maintain the kind of neighborhood and community that those residents have formed over time. And I think that the role of a nonprofit housing developer is a very powerful one when it's used in that manner in low-income neighborhoods.
Any other mayor, investment and progress and displacement?
Yeah, I'd sure like to talk about this for a second. It really, we're just beginning the process of updating our general plan, which hasn't been done in about 25 years or more. And I think this is one of the central problems and central issues that we're facing in regard to that plan. And I don't, we're going to figure out how to work with it, but preserving the diversity, both economic and every other kind of diversity that we have in Culver City, is really a top priority. And we can look at specific areas of the city where, we're working on the revitalization of Bionah Creek, the tributary of the LA River that goes through Culver City, and we know that we want to make it into this linear park, sort of like the High Line in New York, and we know that that's going to increase the property values right around it, and we look at the banks of sort of dingbat type buildings that are there that are really our affordable housing now, or our workforce housing, and we're trying to figure out how we can preserve that. So it is something that we are certainly determined to fight against, that kind of displacement in Culver City, because having the kind of diversity that we have now, year before last, our school district was named the 4th most diverse in the country. We know that is, one of the most valuable aspects of our city, and we're firmly determined to keep it. So it's definitely something, the market is going to push, but we're going to push back.
Mayor Sandoval, you want to take it?
Yeah, I want to affirm what Mayor Butts said about gentrification. In Pomona, we have stretches of poverty, human trafficking, crime, and you have families living right next door to those key corridors. And so this idea that somehow the folks who live in those communities shouldn't have access to the very same things that other communities have access to, I don't accept at all. And it's critical that as we develop policy that we make sure, though, that it's inclusive. And so in the city of Pomona, we work to develop an inclusionary housing model, but we've also created a specific plan that allows developers to develop in the city bypassing the Planning Commission, but it's high standards, high expectations, so that we encourage development, particularly along our key corridors. And so we're beginning to see that development come in the city. In fact, 3 of the newest developments in the city have all been affordable housing projects that have helped get people out of, in some cases, homeless to over 300 units. And so that's just one of the approaches that the city of Pomona is taking.
Adrian, could I say one more thing, please?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, because this is a very complex issue. In communities like Inglewood, everyone focuses on the price of rents and the price of housing. Now, as I told you before, we have more affordable units per capita home numbers anywhere in the South Bay. We have 300 more affordable units online to come online over the next 3 years. This year and the last year, the city's putting aside $2 million for a lottery that will provide $350,000 for 6 families to help them with a down payment on a home that they can afford. So, you know, we are definitely doing things to keep affordable housing, but here's what's more important. The projects, the reconstruction of the Forum, the 300 jobs that came online with the Forum, the NFL Stadium employs 3,000 people every day. We have a 35% local hire goal for every one of these projects. They don't always make 35%, but we have verified payrolls, and we do very well. The unemployment rate in Inglewood has dropped from 17.5% when I took office to 5.4% now. We have, thank you. We have a hard-to-hire provision in all of our development agreements. And what that means in plain language is you can't exclude felons. We have 100 felons working every day on the NFL Stadium project, making between $60 and $90 an hour. We have men primarily that had no hope, hadn't worked in 3 years. Now here's an interesting statistic. That project is in its 3rd year of completion. It's 298 acres. It's 3.5 times the size of Disneyland, 3 times the size of Century City. There has not been one crime reported in that 298 acres in 3 years. It's sacred ground. And so our belief is that the focus should not be totally on what people can afford, but give people the power of self-determination so they can care for themselves. So I appreciate the extra time.
Mayor Gabel-Luddy, I know that you indicated you wanted to follow up.
Well, of all these points made, I wanted to add an additional one. It's not about building housing for housing's sake. It's about building neighborhoods. So the examples that I was giving you earlier, we didn't just renovate an apartment. We put in a child care center. We put in an after-school program area. We put in an educational center and also a workplace center so that people either seeking jobs, seeking additional help with school, seeking some other assistance in the process of doing that, had those added services to the buildings that our housing corporation renovated. And I think that it is more important than just building buildings, that we look at this as building whole neighborhoods to become healthy again.
Mayors, let's move on to our next question. This one is about an aging population. Japan has the world's oldest median age at 46 years. None of your cities is that old. Pomona is the youngest at 31.5, Inglewood the middle at 34.5, Burbank and Culver City are the oldest at 39.4 and 40.9 respectively. What you have in common, however, is that the median age has risen in all 4 cities over the past 2 decades, in some cases by more than 5 years. An aging population can impact a city in many ways: transportation planning, allocation of social services, budgets and pension funding, healthcare. Please tell us how your city is dealing with the fact that America is rapidly getting older. Who'd like to grab that one first?
I can start on that
Mayor?
for a sec. I guess we do have a significant senior and older population in Culver City, and the problems that engenders are tricky and sometimes hidden, because we have a lot of folks who are empty nesters, the property values have soared, and they can't necessarily, they couldn't, there's no way they could afford to buy their house if they had to, but they're having a hard time staying in it. So we found that things like Airbnb, allow some of those folks to be able to stay in their houses. And so we're having to look at different ways of being able to manage that. How do we regulate the Airbnb, because we know it helps some people, but other people don't like it. So it is a significant problem. We have a very popular senior center that really draws from the entire region, and many of those folks are politically active. So it's definitely an important aspect of our community.
Any other mayor want to pick up aging population?
Well, that comes under the heading of, I don't have enough problems and I'm looking for problems. Let me tell you something, that is not an issue with us. We just opened a $27 million, 35,000 square foot senior center, and seniors from Culver City are coming to it too, so take them back.
We've had yours for a while. So.
All right, you've taken ours for years. But what I would tell you, the biggest thing that we've done, and we're not that old a city, but the biggest thing we've done for our seniors that have homes is we've nearly tripled their property values in the last 5 years. And now they have two choices. They have amassed generational wealth to pass on to their children, or if they don't like their children, they can do reverse mortgages and not worry about depending on Social Security. And so, I'm not a Republican, but I do believe in giving people the tools of self-determination so they're not always looking to government to take care of them. And this is very real when you can do a reverse mortgage when you had a house that formerly was underwater.
Yeah, I was just going to add that we're the youngest of the 4 cities here. So I don't know that that's a major issue for us, but I will say this, is that one of the things that is important to us is we have a program in our city called Bright Prospect that I co-founded that helps young people from the community to go to and graduate from colleges all over the country. And these are young people from Pomona, Harvard, Yale, Swarthmore, Amherst, UCLA, UC Berkeley. And the challenge is how do we make sure they have a pathway should they choose to come back to the city? And for us, that's a really central issue because we're talking about housing, we're talking about access to jobs, and so that's critical. But what we're seeing is in fact these young people are coming back and helping their parents buy their first home in our city. They're helping their parents fix up their homes. And so rather than thinking of ourselves as a city that's aging, we think of how do we make sure that we attract that young talent that's going to serve on our serve as commissioners, are going to serve eventually as mayors, as teachers. And so that's where we're really placing a lot of our energy.
So I like to say I always wanted to be a platinum blonde. It just took me 50 years to get there. I think 3 of us anyway are probably over the age of 60. I'm not going to ask. First, keep in mind the SCAG population, and 65% of the population increase in the SCAG region in the next 15 years will be people who are 65 years or older. So it's not just a city issue, it's really going to become a regional issue. And from our point of view, we have in the city of Burbank amazing senior services with an objective of keeping seniors healthy, happy, and active as long as physically possible. We probably have more than our fair share of senior housing developments in the city of Burbank, and it begins to trickle down to the areas that were discussed in the last panel about how easy is it for seniors to navigate around a city. Can they walk? Are there audible crossing signals? Are there small details that the city that's going to promote and ease and help seniors can focus on in order to make the neighborhoods as good as possible? So yes, I have a concern about this, and I have a concern about generational home ownership, which we have, because at some point we want new people to come in as well as the sons and daughters and grandchildren of the people who settled in the community to begin with. So it's a dilemma, and certainly adds to the complexity of the issue.
Mayors, thank you. There was many more questions here, but we are running out of time, except we have time for one more softball question, we'll call it. But we'll go down the line. We've got about a minute for each of you to answer. What is the single most important thing about your city that people should take away from this conference? And what makes you proudest about your community? Mayor Small, let's start with you and we'll work down the line.
Well, the extraordinary thing about where Culver City is right now is that we have this phenomenal economic engine of high tech and media that is just fueling us like rocket fuel. And it's creating, in many places, in many instances, it's creating a greater gap between the rich and the poor. And we see what it's done particularly in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, where in San Francisco, that's all you're left with is the very rich and the very poor. And Culver City is not quite as far down that road as San Francisco is, but we're in exactly the same place with Amazon, Apple, HBO, and the other companies that surround those companies coming in. So there's a lot of income being had, but so our question is, how can we harness that and work with it and maintain and create a society that is inclusive? And that can be more inclusive going forward. Can we take that engine and have it help everybody and not just the rich? And the thing that so excites me about Culver City is that I feel like we're ready to take on that challenge. I feel like we're beginning to understand it. My colleagues on the city council understand it. We're entering into this general plan. So I feel like we can be leaders, not just in our own city, but within the region in Southern California and really throughout the country and throughout the world. And I get a wonderful reaction to this approach to it. Really, when I speak at conferences around the world. So we're at a great moment, but a hugely challenging.
Mayor, thank you. Mayor Gabel-Luddy, thank you.
Well, while Burbank is clearly the media capital of the world,
Right now,
and our position was advanced by Warner Brothers' announcement that Geary Design buildings are going to be located on the NBC site that NBC Universal sold and recently repurchased. Our legacy comes out of Lockheed and labor. So in the middle of the last century, Burbank was built on the labor and the wartime labor that made Lockheed the plane manufacturing business it was then. It went through a significant downturn 30 years ago. And now we're on the rise again with Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, the expansion of Warner Brothers and Disney worldwide corporate headquarters, and thousands of pre- and post-production organizations that are moving into Burbank now. This creates a particular dilemma for us, as it does Culver City, Inglewood, and others, in that we're totally jobs rich. We have more jobs than we have people living in the city, and that's caused a big problem with our traffic and transit congestion. Our goal going forward is to bring about 12,000 more units in the next 15 years in areas of the city that are located near transit stops, and we have 3. Metrolink has 3 stops in the city of Burbank. The thing I'm most proud of in Burbank are our people, our residents, the people who work in the city. They're phenomenal, from the underused churches who are saying, hey, look at us, maybe we can convert some of our property into transitional housing for the homeless. And we're thinking, what a great idea. So we're going forward with that on Proposition H. And our city embraced those kinds of things going forward. So I'm most proud of the people who live there, who are helping us plan that future, and I look forward to many more years serving the city.
Thank you, Mayor Butts, but don't forget Yola and the Girl Scouts.
you're preempting me. I was just getting ready to do that. Okay, so the thing I'm most proud of is going to come at the end of this little list that I'm about to give you, which was going to start with the fact that in March of this year, a month ago, the Girl Scouts of Greater Los Angeles moved their headquarters from Marina del Rey to Inglewood. Now, Inglewood was formerly known as a poverty, crime-ridden community, but the Girl Scouts moved here, so that destroys that whole brand. The LA Philharmonic bought a building from the city that we purchased. It was an old security bank building. It's 50 yards from City Hall. We bought it to control the Civic Plaza. We paid $4.1 million for it 2 years ago. Escrow closed on it to sell to them for $5.65 million. They're going to renovate it into an orchestra hall designed by Frank Gehry at a cost of $15 million. We would have paid them $5 million to do that. They're moving their youth orchestra program to Inglewood. As you know, in 2020, the Rams and the Chargers are playing their home games here. The NFL Network, and I'm sorry to say, Mayor, is moving from Culver City to Inglewood. Okay, we're good with that in 2020.
That building's already taken. So.
All right. In 2022, Super Bowl 56, 2023, the NC2A Championship Bowl game 2024, the Clippers will open an 18,000-seat basketball arena in 2024. In 2026, we're negotiating for a FIFA World Cup. In 2028, the Summer World Olympic Games will be held in Inglewood. The unemployment rate has plummeted, but here's what I'm most proud of. I was a policeman in Inglewood for 19 years, from 72 to 91, left as deputy chief of police in Santa Monica for 15 years, and 5 years I was in charge of counterterrorism and public safety for the Los Angeles World Airport System. So I'd worked in 3 cities, came back to Inglewood to run for mayor. When I came back, if you asked somebody that worked or lived in Inglewood where you lived or worked, if you lived there, you'd say, I live right next to Westchester, or it's just south of Culver City. I live about 2 miles from LA International Airport. But they would never say where they lived. Now you ask somebody from Inglewood where you live, they say, I live in Inglewood, California, and they become the center of attention. But the thing I'm most proud of is that there's a new phrase in the real estate business when they list a property. They list it as Inglewood adjacent. Boom.
Finally.
Well, that's always he's a challenge to follow up, but I will certainly try my best. The thing that I'm proudest of is the people of Pomona. The level of engagement of the community is incredible. We have an effort called Pomona Placemaking, where we have residents working on establishing trails in our hills. We have folks who are developing children's festivals and 5Ks, and there's just this engagement in the city where there's a challenge, there's folks who are stepping up, and for me, that is critical. And it also ties into the partnerships that we have with our key institutions like Cal Poly Pomona, Western University, which is one of the fastest growing medical universities, Casa Colina, which, if you haven't heard of Casa Colina, is one of the leading rehabilitation centers in the world. And that's not to also mention the Fairplex, because long before Amazon came to us, there was the Fairplex where you actually had to go see Encyclopedia Britannicas and figure out where the latest products were coming from. And in fact, we have Fuller Seminary that was in the city of Pasadena for 70 years, but is now moving to the city of Pomona. And so we see tremendous possibility, not only what our residents are doing, but the partnerships that exist between our key institutions. And we have over 750 acres between the Lanterman project and the Fairplex, and we think that particularly with the population moving further east, that Pomona is going to play a central role in the development of the Southern California region. We may not have the Rams. Or the Chargers. Okay. But we're close to the mountains, we're close to the beaches, and we're certainly in the desert. So proud of the people of Pomona.
Mayor Sandoval, Mayor Butts, Mayor Gabel-Luddy, Mayor Small, thank you for being on this panel. If you want to step down, thank you for joining us. We have one more speaker to introduce. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce your closing speaker now. Let's give another round of applause, mayors. This was great. I've been interviewing Mayor Butts since he was a police chief, so we kind of go back a little ways. Wendy Gruhl is your next speaker. She's a member of the Board of Advisors of the UCLA Luskin School of Public Affairs. She chaired the committee that helped put this conference together. She's the former city controller of the city of Los Angeles, a former member of the LA City Council. As most of you will remember, she ran for mayor in 2013, was the first woman to advance to a Los Angeles mayoral runoff during that campaign. Ms. Gruhl has deep experience in housing issues, is a policy expert on homelessness. She was appointed by Mayor Eric Garcetti in 2016 to chair the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority's Board of Commissioners. The same year, Ms. Gruhl was appointed as an executive in residence and strategic advisor at the California State University Northridge Nazarian College of Business and Economics. During her time on the LA City Council from 2002 to 2009, Ms. Gruhl represented the San Fernando Valley. Working mom and lifelong Angelino, Ms. Gruhl attended public schools in Los Angeles and holds a Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science from UCLA. Please welcome the Honorable Wendy Gruhl.
Yes, I'm the last person between you and getting somewhere to eat, so I will be brief. I think she could have easily said just recovering politician. That would have described all of that. But thank you so much for coming to the inaugural Luskin Summit. Really quite an amazing day, and I think exceeded our expectations. I jokingly said, you know, sometimes you plan a party and you wonder if anyone's going to come. Well, in this instance, it was sold out, so to speak, and so we're very happy that you could be with us today. I'm very proud to be a member, as mentioned, of the UCLA Luskin School of Public Affairs and chair of this inaugural Luskin Summit. We do have several other members, which I'd love to just highlight, and the ones I saw, I'm going to just mention. We have Jill Black and Richard Katz, Maria Chu, Stephen Chung, Michael Fleming, our wonderful chair of our advisory board, and I think I've reached everyone, and of course, Meyer Luskin, we can't forget that part. So let's thank them for their leadership and being part of this. We hope that you left or are going to leave today becoming more informed about some of the issues that are facing Los Angeles County, but even more so looking at the solution to many of these issues. We're going to send you a survey. We hope you will fill it out and let us know what we did right and where we can make improvements, because we anticipate, and I will look at Gary Segura and say that this is the inaugural and there will be a second year going forward. He's giving the thumbs up, okay. So I hope, though, that you will continue your involvement with the Luskin Center, because it's not just today, but many of the other programs and future events for faculty and students that they share with our surrounding community around Los Angeles and, of course, across the country. Please be our advocate so that we can find further solutions for the issues that we discussed today. There actually is another event coming up on April 30th across campus downtown, which is sponsored by the Luskin Center and talking about homelessness, which I think we heard in almost every session today. And so also, if you participated or signed up for the sustainability tour, we hope that you'll meet us at the back of the room at the end of this program. I want to take a moment. They're raising their hands in the back, okay. I do want to take a moment, if we could thank the staff of the Luskin Center that worked so hard today to make this happen. It really was a dream, and they came together. So I think I'm one of those few that Richard talked about earlier today in one of our panels, which asked how many of us were born and raised in Los Angeles. And how many of you were born and raised in Los Angeles? Okay, see, there's a little bit more, it seems like, Richard, than earlier today. But we are proud, I think, individuals of what Los Angeles not only has been, but what can be. And that each of us has a responsibility to participate in that. And the Luskin Center and what they're able to do and what Maya and Renee Luskin have done has made it possible for us to look at it in a thoughtful way in looking at not only from our students' perspective, but our professors and the community at large, to say we can even make Los Angeles better. And with your help, we can do that, and with the leadership of the Luskin Center. Thank you so much for being here today, and have a great, wonderful day. Thank you. And I want to thank Arlene Alpert, who was our wonderful MC today, and who is a treasure of Los Angeles, and KABC, who has been helpful, and of all our sponsors. Thank you very much.